Hello,
Yeah.
everyone. My name is Kevin. I'm a designer at Hiveworks, and I have the pleasure of being in the same call with Brienne of Harpy Gee. Brienne, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Like I have a million things to do, but I am taking a break right now. So it's great.
Cool, cool. What for our listeners, for me, in this wild time that we're in right now, what do you have for breakfast today?
I had fried egg on toast with some avocado,
Hell yeah. I
and it
am
was
very
really
jealous.
good.
We were
I
talking.
was gonna make French toast, but my milk had spoiled.
Oh no.
So I'm holding my paper. I shouldn't be doing that.
No, that's okay. Like, oh, that sucks that you're, man.
I
Like,
just bought it last weekend too.
oh
And
no.
it had the right date. It probably was sitting in the truck too long before they put it in the grocery store
Oh
with
no.
everything going on. So who knows? Who knows? I did get to use the milk a little bit though. I didn't have to throw the whole thing out. I just went to go use it. And I was like, oh shoot. So it's fine. One of my friends surprised me with a box of fresh maple syrup and
Whoa.
cheese a day or two ago. So I was like, maple syrup, French toast. So it's
Oh.
okay. It's like French toast is good when the bread gets stale anyway. So like, you know, if I go out next weekend and get milk,
Mm-hmm.
it'll be perfect.
Awesome. I am very jealous of that. Like, the avocado, the crate of maple syrup that you got. Like,
Yeah.
myself, I had a breakfast of thinking about Harpy G. And that's called a segue. Um, uh,
I am so sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm actually no. I have been reading up on RPG because I've read it off and on throughout the years, but I hadn't caught up on the latest chapter.
Mm.
And having this opportunity to interview you here for this stream gave me a good chance to not only go back and read some older chapters, but also catch up. And this when we talked before, we sort of came up with an idea of fun stuff to talk about with RPG.
Hmm.
And my first question for you is: some of the people in the stream right now might not know what RPG is. How do you pitch RPG to people?
Oh wow. Of course I left the book with the back, you know. Anyway, I usually just pitch it as like an elf, a knight, and a witch, and a prince. Like they run an item shop in a small fantasy village, and there's potatoes and a goblin cat that stores weapons, and that's usually how I've been pitching it
Mm-hmm.
off the get-go. Like if I'm at a convention, because I have a wide range of ages that read the comic. Like I have people as young as 4 and 5 that read it, up to people older than me who read it. And that's something I like. Like I want to keep it that way. So I usually pitch it very, very bare bones. Um, Also, like, because I have an animation background, like they want you to pitch things in one sentence, which is very hard to do if you have, for how long Harpy has been going. It's very faceted now. Like
Mm.
there's just so many elements to it. It's hard to break it down.
Yeah.
But and these are things I had to write up when I was in development Nickelodeon. I have a bunch of stuff written about what the story arcs are, like all this stuff, and like the character motivations and what the underlying themes are. And a lot of that stuff I don't think was ever seen actually, even by the execs that it was passed on to.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a lot. They don't really need it. They just need something really simple. So I kind of went through that last night because it's like I was trying to come up with like a really for any like it's a little spoilerly if you haven't read it, but it's only these are really only spoilers probably for like the first 2 chapters of the comic for how long it's been going.
Mm-hmm.
Um but I guess the real rundown for Harpy is Harpy is her real name is actually Gigi Geranium.
Mm-hmm.
but her nickname is Harpy. But Harpy is the only elf who can't use magic in a world full of it. She has a pet goblin cat named Pumpkin, who is her bag of holding, and he is her first and best friend. So she's a character who at first has her dreams and talent taken from her, but still becomes a brave heroine in her own right. She runs away to a small human town to find her independence, and everyone she meets, she affects those around her in a positive way. So that's pretty much the rundown of it.
Mm-hmm. And how accurate do you feel that is whenever you pitch it?
um, you mean like to other people or
Yeah, because
like
like that is a more expanded pitch. Like there, you gave me your first sort of
I
condensed one.
I usually
That
just give
fuller
people
one.
the I usually give people the very first one where it's a fantasy comic. It's more slice of life. Although anyone who's been reading the comic knows that there's actually there's other stuff going in the background.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing I keep in mind when I'm working on the comic is that one of the themes with it is that even though the setting is in a small town, that small town is just as important as the capital city elsewhere in the kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
Like things that seem very small or just day to day, they affect other bigger things. So it's a little slice of life, but I don't know. I just it's one of those things like that small things have value, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, and it's RPG has been going on long enough, and this is something that I want to get into. Is that I, from my understanding, a comic that goes on long enough becomes about a lot more than you can summarize in a sentence. Like if you ever
Oh
could,
yes.
you know.
Yes.
And I've seen the expression on some artists' faces when they try to explain their comic to someone, and even if they know a sentence that they can pitch, they can feel that there's something that they're leaving out, or they don't know what part they should leave out.
Yeah, that's very difficult to do. It's hard.
And when you went through that process, like you mentioned briefly the pitch that you made, do you think that you have a better handle on it now, or do you feel like Harpy as a story, Harpy Gee, is big enough or like moves around so much that you kind of can't come up with a good way to summarize it?
It's not I mean, like I said, like I was able to like write that up last night. Like it is a lot about like Harpy when she was a child, she could use magic. She was really good at it
Mm-hmm.
and it was taken from her. And there is a quote that happens during chapter 2 where she's talking to another character that is going through their own growing pains, but almost the opposite of her, where it's somebody who has fallen into having magic and doesn't really want it. But she kind of says, sometimes you have no control over the role you are given, no matter of the one you wanted to play. She's like, I've moved forward from what I can't change. It wasn't the end of the world. It's different, but it's not bad. If my plans had gone the way I wished, I wouldn't be here now. My life is still moving along. So she's kind of an optimistic. Um, she's a extrovert or whatever. But a lot of what she says kind of ties into a little bit with like my own life as far as work and you work really hard and you expect certain things to happen, but they don't happen, and it can feel really devastating, but other things happen that you don't expect and you learn to enjoy those and you start to see those as gifts. So yeah, her as a character, um I don't know, it kind of ties into like the story too. Like it's like things might seem small or not perfect or whatever, but they affect everything around them
Mm-hmm.
and it can still be okay and good. So I want people to feel good after they read the comic. I mean, there's going to be some down points or like parts in the story where things are going to be kind of sad or melancholy, but there's always going to be like some sort of light at the end of that.
That's wonderful.
So
That's
sorry if that went
wonderful.
on a bit of a tangent. Like I'm just thinking of too many things at once sometimes.
Oh no, 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 that's no problem. And for people who are in the chat, you should be seeing pages right now, and the character of Harpy Gee is the one with green hair. You should be seeing pages from all over Harpy Gee. Some newer ones, some older ones. And Brienne, before we get too deep in, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So, I have been working in the animation industry since about 2004,
Mm-hmm.
and I worked as a character designer, as a storyboard artist, as a director, and I've worked on a couple of pilots. Excuse me, I drink water.
No, that's
I
problem. No problem.
Yeah, I directed a series of shorts for DC Nation back in 2011, called Amethyst Princess of Gemworld.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually got to make a pilot through Nickelodeon for Harpy Gee, and you can go on YouTube, just search Harpy Gee, and it'll come up. They had to turn comments off because of the whole, the kid thing that was, I forgot what it was called, the YouTube thing that was going on.
Yeah.
But you can watch it. It has the most views out of all the Nickelodeon shorts.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm really happy about that, and Nick was really cool, and they linked to the comic in their comment or their description box or whatever.
That's really
So
cool. That's
yeah,
awesome.
I actually had a really good experience with that studio. I had a few people championing me to make sure that what we were making was in spirit of the comic and
Mm-hmm.
wasn't going too far off the rails. So yeah. So but yeah, that's kind of my background. I kind of do a little bit of everything in animation. I'm currently directing on DC Superhero Girls.
Oh,
Um, I
cool.
started, yeah, I started a couple months ago. The crew has been really great. It's been a lot of work, of course, like I was expecting that, but we started work from home back in March, and like I actually kind of have had the comic on hiatus for the past month. I've been running a guest comic
Mm-hmm.
because like, everyone's just adjusting to the work from home thing, and it just threw an extra wrench. But I had a friend surprise me with a guest comic. I had no idea he made it. He just showed up with it, and that saved my butt the past 3 weeks.
That's
So
wonderful. Who made it?
yeah. Uh, my buddy Gray Grankin. He also works in animation. He actually he was directing on the How to Train Your Dragon TV show for the past few years.
Mm-hmm.
So there was like, I think there was an Easter egg some people noticed in there, and like I didn't even know he put it in there. Like,
Oh,
so
really?
if anybody was like, that looks like, that sort of looks like a character, but it's not that character, but it looks like that character. And yeah, so if you're a How to Train Your Dragon fan, there's an Easter egg in there for you.
Oh, wow. That's really cool.
Yeah, it was really nice though. Like I was kind of like, well, I'll just put the comic on break for a few weeks, and he was just like, oh no, I did this 6-page comic, and I was like, sweet.
Awesome. Awesome.
So
And
yeah, so
anybody in the chat, if you're interested, I'm going to do it right now. But if you type exclamation point Harpy, you will be able to see the short little pitch that Brienne just gave, and Brienne's Twitter info, as well as a link to the comic. Brienne, uh, do you prefer that name? Brienne, do you want me to use your full name?
Brienne's fine.
Okay.
It's fine.
This is a lot of cool stuff that's happened to Harpy. Like, you are like, oh gosh, like Easter eggs in movies, pitches with Nickelodeon, like all kinds of stuff. This has to have had an influence on Harpy as a story over time, right?
Um, maybe a little bit. I mean, like I think because of my background in animation, I really treat the comic more in a different way. Like I don't have a comic background.
Mm-hmm.
I actually did the comic because I had some friends that were they told me I needed to do the comic. Like I like the beginning of like the 2010 decade, there was some really rough stuff that kind of happened. It wasn't great. And I was just I felt really lost, and I just I just did not feel great.
Mm.
And there is a website which is kind of broken right now. Nobody's been updating on it for a few years, but there was a comic website called Dumb Comics, and it was run by a group of animation people, and um everybody had their own day for updating. Like you had to update that day. Like you had Monday, like some people had Monday, Tuesday, or whatever. And they had a slot open for Monday, and like they'd been asking me for a year to do this comic. And Harpy actually had been an animation pitch before this.
Oh.
It yeah, it had been it got briefly optioned at Cartoon Network for the Cartoon Institute back in like 2008 or 9.
Mm-hmm.
um because that was like during the recession, and I didn't have any work that year, and somebody told me, hey, they're on you're like I heard they want to see a pitch from you, and I'd already been drawing the Harpy characters. It wasn't a pitch at that point, actually. Sorry, I'm like kind of going on a backwards tangent, but
It's okay.
my first animation job was on Teen Titans,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd always wanted to make stuff outside of work on my own anyway. And my first boss, Glenn Murakami, was like, "Hey, do you ever want to do something else other than just doing design or whatever?" And I was like, "Well, I want to make stuff, films or whatever." And I kind of just started drawing the characters. Like I was like, I want to draw what I want to make. Like I want to make a cartoon or something about like RPG type characters. Like I used to play a lot of JRPGs when I was younger. And anyway, I've been drawing those characters for a while. Cartoon Institute was a thing that was happening. They were looking for pitches from artists. So I threw Harpy together really quick. Like I wasn't working at that point. There was no design jobs. And I pitched it, and Craig McCracken, who was in charge of the Cartoon Institute, he liked it, and they wanted me to put a storyboard together. And basically for me to get the money, I had to board it myself. So it
Whoa.
forced me to do it forced me to do my very first storyboard, and it's awful. It's so crude. Um and I did it, and Craig actually really liked it. That's actually
Oh, that's awesome.
how yeah, that's kind of how I know Lauren Faust,
Mm.
because he brought my pitch home, and then she messaged me and was just like, I really like this. If this goes forward, can I write a script on it? And this is like before, like she was on, I think they were doing Foster's at that point, or they were finishing up on Foster's.
Mm-hmm.
So Pony and all that stuff hadn't happened yet. So I pitched the board, and then the head of the studio basically was like, "Oh, we're not going to take shows with girl leads. We only take shows for boys and mothers of boys."
Hmm.
So yeah, that was always kind of weird after that. And then I was kind of like, well, fine, whatever. But I ended up getting a storyboard job because I did that. Like I ended up boarding on Batman, and that's segued into boards. So Harpies had a weird influence in my career. Like it's never, you know, wasn't really an animated thing for a very long time, but it's actually affected a lot of my decisions. So fast forward to 2011, 12 or whatever, and like things kind of just did not work out.
Mm-hmm.
And I had some friends that were like, hey, you should really make Harpy a comic. It's time. Like, uh, I had a friend message me, and she was like, I really want to see this done. She's like, I think it's time for it. So I took the Monday slot on Dumb Comics, which was really scary because if anyone's familiar with Dumb Comics from about, 7 or 8 years ago, there was just like a weird toxic comment section on that site,
Oh
and I didn't
no.
have to deal with it too much. Um, but honestly, the response for Harpy was really good, even though I kept trying to quit it the first 6 months just because I was kind of like, oh no, maybe I shouldn't be doing this or whatever. Because it's hard to put yourself out there. And it's the other thing too is that when I first started updating Harpy, I didn't have the full story figured out at that point. I was
Mm.
just kind of doing it in baby steps. I actually retconned a lot of stuff early on, but by halfway through chapter 1, I knew what my plot is. I knew where I wanted the characters to go and what was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I changed a lot of things at the beginning because there was a lot of stuff in my animated pitch that wasn't working. Um, so my main goal when I started the comic was just to get the characters to the item shop, make sure that they became friends, just keep it really basic, and then afterward I kind of filled everything else out. So yeah. So anyway, yeah, like I feel like Harpy's really intertwined with like my animation career in that way, and I kept doing the comic after that, and then I was working. I at some point I ended up storyboarding at Nickelodeon, and Nick really wanted me to do something there, but same thing. Early on, they were like, "We would take a project from you, but like we can't take any female-led stories
Mm-hmm.
because the word the execs at the very top, like they're only going to pick up stuff that they know is going to make them money or isn't a risk."
Mm.
And this isn't really even a knock against Nick. Every studio does this. And things have gotten better, obviously. Like there's more diversity out there finally, and it's been proven that like that's not necessarily the case, that only one type of thing sells. So, because the thing is even the execs giving these marching orders, like they don't agree with it either, but it's their job. So I kept working on Harpy while I was storyboarding on a show, and then the director I was working for, he found out about the comic, and he actually was really supportive and went through the comic and found compositions or panels he liked, and was like, "Hey, you should try to put this more into your storyboarding." So, and also if I ever had any downtime, he would just like come by my desk and be like, "Oh yeah, I'm not going to have your script ready for a couple days. Like, just work on your comic." So it was kind of nice.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of nice people in the industry, and I'm really grateful for that. Anyway, just to get really quick to why Harpy became a short. So one of the execs who had asked me when I first started working at Nick to pitch something, and they're like, "Oh, we can't make that right now. Like they're looking for something really specific." And I could have pitched something with what they wanted, but I also know like if I work on something I don't want to do, I'm not going to be happy, and they're not going to get the best work out of me anyway. So I just kind of told them like, "Oh, just pair me up with somebody. Like if you want me to do art for somebody or something, if it comes up. Like
Mm-hmm.
otherwise, like I'm fine with it just being a comic. It's fine as a comic. I'm happy. The people reading it are happy." It's like why ruin a good thing? Like I don't have to constantly be trying to like top myself or take it further. Like sometimes it's okay to let things be what they are.
Mm-hmm.
Um so yeah, anyway, one of the execs came back a couple years later, and I was still at Nick, and she called me on my work phone, and she's like, "Hey, so there's the door open. They're looking for a 22-minute action adventure fantasy led girl show."
Ooh.
So she's like, "Do you want to give Harpy a chance?" And I was like, "Yeah, let's take it." Because that's your thing too, is a lot of people don't realize animation development, a lot of it is timing and luck.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to keep putting yourself out there, so when the time does happen, I never thought I would ever see that happen. And I also had people on the Nickelodeon side that made sure that I kept my publishing rights, my self-publishing rights.
Yeah.
So that is why Harpy was able to keep running as a comic while it was in animation. And that was something I also wasn't going to back down from. Like if you get approached by a studio or a publisher, like you need to realize like what are you willing to let go? Like what, like is it worth it? And I that was the only thing I was not willing to back away from, and I luckily had people on my side with that. Because honestly, most stuff that goes into development does not get to go to series.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of close friends who have stuff that's locked away. Or, a lot of stuff is reboots that you work on too. And it doesn't matter what you do with a reboot, it's not yours when it's done.
Yeah.
You can still be proud of it, you can still learn from it, you can still love it. But
Mm.
yeah, so Harpy got to be a short. And of course, the thing is like things change on a dime. Like, yeah, that door was open, when I went into development, but like a year later, that door closed and they're not looking for that stuff anymore.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so I wasn't, I wasn't like heartbroken. I was a little bit like, oh, that's a bummer, but also, yay, I can keep going with the comic because the other obstacle I was going to have was if it did get picked up, like the people who originally helped with my deal weren't at the studio anymore.
Hmm.
So, and I don't think the execs I was passed on to even looked at any of the stuff I had. So I was kind of okay with them passing on it.
Mm-hmm.
Because it would be such a shame to lose what the ending of this comic's going to be. There's only a few people who know what the ending is. And one of them is like the exec that originally put me into development. And when I told her what the ending was, she actually clutched her heart. So I was kind of like,
Aw.
oh, yeah, and I worry about like the comic going off the rails or feeling too convoluted, but I actually am working off of an outline.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of nice to be in animation development because some of the people that saw the outline, I'd be like, is this clear? Like, should I work on this more? And they were very positive about it. And they're like, no, this totally makes sense. This reads. So
That's
anyway, sorry if
wonderful.
that was a little bit like, woo, but it's
No,
just a lot.
no. And I mean, that's something that I wanted to know about was, I mean, from my understanding, animation is a very demanding job. It's, depending on what you're doing, but more often than not, you're very busy. You're working on other people's stuff. You're drawing a lot. And
Mm-hmm.
that has to have some influence on at least the process of Harpy Gee. But because you've also pitched it, there's content there. There's, how you've changed parts of the story based on having to pitch it. There's
Mm-hmm.
other aspects of that. Is there, and this happened at what chapter was this happening in Harpy Gee?
Oh yeah, that's another thing. I know I've talked to some of the readers on Discord about it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I had just started chapter 4 when I started in development at Nickelodeon.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that was cool about being in development at Nick was they had a program called the Collective where all I did for 6 months was just work on my own project. I wasn't working on anyone else's show. It was just me working on Harpy and doing my comic for Harpy. So that was really cool. Like that does not that that never happens.
Mm-hmm.
um so yeah, it was chapter 4 and I knew I wanted to have a arc that was a little bit of like a festival and like getting to know the town, and I stretched it out longer than it should have because I was buying myself time. The chapter that is going on right now, we're actually back in the main storyline. I mean, not that chapter 4 wasn't the main story. Chapter 4 was kind of like, I want to wrap things up in a nice package because if Harpy got picked up, it would be 2 more years till anyone would ever see it again.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to leave the readers at a good spot where everybody, there's a resolution with some things or like the main stuff. But yeah, it got stretched out longer because of that. Like I was biding myself time, and there was some stuff I really wanted to see happen in animation first.
Mm-hmm.
Like the current chapter, there's a certain character that shows up in town. Like some of the readers have been waiting 6 or 7 years for this, and she just showed up.
Mm-hmm.
I really wanted to see that animated first. So yeah, I was stalling myself. So I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, chapter 4 felt really long," and it's like, yeah. Also, it was me enjoying my time with the characters a little bit. Like I'm like, I want some silly stuff. Like I want to see them, play games together or like, introduce some secondary characters and stuff. Just flesh things out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, going forward, all weights are off. So things are gonna start happening fast.
Got you. And this chapter 4
Yeah.
is the smallest apology, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I posted a link to that in chat if anyone's interested. The so at this point, I mean, you were pitching it, you were working on stuff, you were focusing on the characters, you were thinking about a lot of different aspects. Like, When this comic has been sort of interwoven into your life, into your creative life, like some people have distinct separations between their work and their creative work. Um, uh, Other people's those blend together. It sounds like that's your case. How did you avoid getting burnt out?
I have gotten burnt out. I have taken breaks, and I think anyone doing a webcomic should feel okay taking breaks. If you can, just let readers know in advance if you need to take a break. Like, I am so appreciative to anyone who's been reading it for understanding that. Like, I have never gotten much flack from needing to take a break.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when when I was storyboarding at Nickelodeon, when I was working on Pig Goat Banana Cricket, that was a very, very heavy show to storyboard on.
Mm-hmm.
It was a 22-minute show, and there was a chunk of boards that I kind of had to board the bulk of myself. So I was working weekends, and I can't do all-nighters anymore. That was the last show I did all-nighters on. And you
Wow.
shouldn't have to do all-nighters. It just was that was the situation. And the thing is, I can work really hard as long as the people above me have my back, you know.
Yeah.
So I I don't have any regrets for what I did, but I don't want to have to do that again.
Yeah.
But what basically happens is, on a storyboard rotation, you usually have 2 or 3 weeks to do your rough and your thumb, like your rough boards. So during those 2 and 3 weeks, I would not work on Harpy. There was no time to work on Harpy. I was boarding on weekends.
Mm-hmm.
But then once you get your rough in, my notes were usually pretty light, so I'd have my weekends back. So the next 2 or 3 weeks, when we were doing cleans, which is like going in and just fixing, finessing the drawings, any notes they have, adjusting, just the whatever loose ends.
Yeah.
My weekends would be free, and also I'd usually be a little ahead of schedule by then. Like, how I mentioned, like, my director would come by, like, like, if I had my stuff turned in, he's like, you're done, you don't have anything for you.
Gotcha.
So I would maybe have a Friday that was kind of free. So I would work on my buffer during those weeks. Like, I board and thumbnail. I call it boarding. I thumbnail and I rough out my pages and thumbnail my pages out in chunks with Harpy. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I work in sections. Like, an example, like, there's one, I think the third chapter, there's a part where Ash and Humphrey become friends. Like, Ash tries Humphrey's muffins and he's like, "Oh my god, these are amazing." Like, that was probably 4 or 6 pages. I will rough out 4 or 6 pages on like a Saturday, start pencil roughs, that day, then do the inks on the Sunday, color that night on like the first 1 or 2 pages. But the thing is since I have those roughs and thumbnails, that frees up space in my brain, and then I just that clears me for the next 4 or 5 weeks for the next board, like, while I'm at work and I'm on the board rotation with the roughs. I don't have to worry about those pages. They're already done.
Mm.
So I was constantly eating into my buffer, and that worked for a while. And then when I started development on Harpy and Nickelodeon, and I didn't have the uh, full time storyboard job, like, I had a little bit more of a breather. I also try to take at least a month off between chapters,
Mm.
and I think that's a pretty good idea. Although, whenever I start the comic up again, it's always the same struggle to get, like, back into the rhythm of it. Like, it never gets easier, but once I do, it's pretty. It's the thing is like, I think the reason I've been able to keep doing the comic for so long is I've kept it as something that I can look forward to. I kind of keep it in this category of being a hobby. Like, this is my therapy. This is where I go to get away from things. Like, I'm free here. And if it starts to not be fun anymore, then yeah, like, I'm going to need to take a break, because I want to keep doing it. And I'm only going to keep doing it as long as I want to. So,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely. And
yeah.
that sounds really wise to, I mean, once you hit a certain point, I've heard from other artists that, when you start your comic, you have a story to tell, you have a direction you want to go in, but I believe I've used this metaphor before. You're sort of building your own house. And
Yes.
when you set it up, you're in control over how you want that house to operate. And for some people, they accidentally build themselves a prison because they have too aggressive of an update schedule for their life, or other factors. And it sounds like you figured out a pretty decent rhythm to set with yourself, giving yourself breaks, things like that. And other creators I've heard are worried. They want to take breaks, but they're worried how much they'll impact their numbers, how much they'll impact their lives and their readerships. It sounds like your readers are pretty happy as long as you are being really communicative with them. Is that true?
Yeah. Yeah. The other part of that too is I'm very fortunate because my real bread and butter and how I'm staying afloat and a roof over my head is because I have a job working in the animation industry.
Yeah.
Like I'm part of a union. We have good health insurance. Like I'm really busy, but I'm not busy all the time. Like, I have like we only have a job as long as our show is running.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty common in between like shows I'm working on to be out of work for 2 or 3 months. There's a lot of give and take with that. Um, so Harpy isn't my main income. I don't treat it as my main income.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have like if I update more than once a week, then I'm going to be falling into that trap. It's going to be work, and I don't want it to be work.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I like to update like 1 or 2 pages a week, and I know it kind of confuses some people because like, well, she should stretch it out to 1 page a week or do multiple updates if she's doing multiple pages. Well, I don't know what my schedule at work is going to be that week. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know if like I have an extra fire that needs to be put out. Like it's just like that's my main job. Other people are relying on me. Like I cannot. That's not flexible. Um, so, and I like to do 1 or 2 page updates because I like to keep things like I like to end an update like on a button. There is usually a joke or a piece of information. So if I can do it in 1 page and it flows okay, that's fine. But that's a big reason why I usually do 2 pages.
Mm-hmm.
Is I just kind of like how it reads, and in that way, it hooks people to come back the following week that way too.
Mm-hmm.
Like you kind of give them a meal, like a snack, but then they're gonna come back for the next course, sort of.
Yeah. And it's there is something about deciding how you are going to update and what sort of feeling that leaves the audience with. There are Netflix shows that update entire seasons at a time. Um,
Hmm.
and how, rather than thinking about how that will influence, I mean, in this case, you are thinking about your reader's experience, but you're also paying attention to not to go too far overboard and burn yourself out. Because then
Hmm.
you'll never get to the
Yeah.
ending that you want.
Yeah.
And
And
has this always been this way, or have you slowly developed, like figured out how you're doing this? Like
I
updating
just
2 at a time?
I just kind of figured that out probably about like the first year in.
Mm-hmm.
Because I knew going in, like I was already kind of like in a rough patch when I started the comic. So when the comic started, like the backgrounds don't have any color. They're all mostly black and white. I would just use color burn, and do a layer of Photoshop on top a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I made a decision that the characters were like going to be the only things that were colored early on. I try to be really economical with the colors I use. Like the green that's in Harpy's hair is the same green in Ash's eyes. That way I'm not having to like go back and forth as much.
Yeah.
Like there's tricks like that. I mean, obviously, like in the like especially this chapter, like I've been like I'm coloring the backgrounds now. Like I want this for myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Also, yeah.
no, I
Sorry.
was going
I
to
just
say, yeah, absolutely. Like in knowing what you're doing for yourself is really important.
Yeah. I will say I get color help once in a while from my friend Josh Perez, who's in the chat. He goes by Dimooch. So hi, thank you, Josh.
Oh,
He has saved my butt a couple of times. Like sometimes, like if I have a really bad crunch and the pages are inked and done, but coloring can still take a long time.
yes.
And I'll message him like, "Are you available? Do you have like some free wiggle room?" And yeah, he just does it, and he's a professional at it too. So whenever the color looks really good, that's him.
Oh, thank you for doing that. That's really nice.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, that's nice on him.
That's so wonderful. So it sounds like you
Yeah.
have support in other places as well for when
Yeah.
things aren't exactly working the way you'd like.
Yeah, and I usually whenever I'm working on my story on my side, I have a couple of close friends that I'll I'll um I'll get their thoughts on it and be like, hey, is this clear? Is this worded okay? So that's kind of just a system that I've had. Like I have a friend. I mean, we can't do it right now because of all the social distancing.
Mm-hmm.
But on weekends, usually on Saturdays, I'll go to a coffee shop and hang out with a friend, and she usually does like knitting or crochet or other things while I just draw my comic and we just talk about various things and I'll be like, hey, does the motivation for this character seem like weird to you or and that's been nice too. Like it's hard to work in a bubble. Like I might seem like I'm working in a vacuum, but I don't really feel like I am because of that.
Mm-hmm.
So, because also the other thing too, to like go back to the animation thing, like there's a lot of stuff in animation that as much as we want to do it, like stories that we want to tell or types of characters, um, it's we have a company or a corporation above us that says we can't do these things, you know, because money
Yeah.
and we don't want to offend a certain country or something. But the thing is the comic has been an outlet for that. And just really quickly, just because it's something that popped up in my brain. The other thing that's been interesting because I understand how long it takes to do a season of animation. Like 13 episodes can easily take you almost like it takes 9 months for animation to come back once you ship the storyboard.
Mm-hmm.
So it almost feels like 2 years till audiences see it. I can finish 2 chapters of Harpy in 2 years. And when I was breaking down chapters for how they would work as episodes for Nick, I found out that each chapter would be like just a random number, but like 4 or 5 episodes. So it was like kind of funny, like, oh, it takes 2 years to do 2 chapters, and each chapter is like almost 5 episodes a piece. That's close to a full season. I'm spending the same amount of time doing like it's just been funny that way. And I think that's one reason I've been kind of okay with it not going to animation.
Yeah.
Like it would take the same amount of time to do animation as it is to do the comic story.
That's
So
interesting.
yeah, it's really funny that kind of did the math on it and like, huh, like, so do I want to risk a studio taking this and then deciding that if they want it, they want to do 11-minute, but like we can't, have any main plot. We can't have, I know Cartoon Network, one of their notes was that Ash needed to be the lead character
Mm-hmm.
if they wanted to go forward with it. And at the time I was willing to do it just because it was like, oh, it's a foot in the door.
Yeah.
And I wasn't as attached to the characters then either.
Mm-hmm.
Like they weren't fleshed out enough then. So, but
And
yeah, just something to keep in mind for anybody who's doing web comics and working animation at the same time. Like just think about the timeline. You're not losing anything really if it doesn't go to animation.
yeah, I have heard that because I have some friends who, they will do a webcomic and then they'll work on other kinds of art. And they'll make jokes about how, like, oh, I had this great scene in my head. It'll be a year until I can do it. But hearing the other end of, like, it's the same time for me, I'm an animator, or maybe I'll be able to do it faster, depending on their process. Like, it is interesting to hear that. And, like, also, yeah, like, Ash, for those who aren't familiar, Ash is a character that is a bit more. Is it appropriate to say that Ash is kind of like a Sokka character from Avatar: The Last Airbender, like a
Yeah,
bit of a practical person?
he started out the least fleshed out. He was the blandest character when he started, and he's really grown since then. I actually wrote that down on my notepad in case that came up. Technically, Ash is this character that really actually should be the hero in the story. Like
Mm,
he has all the settings. He's the one who has his father's sword. He's the one who's kicked out and like sent. He seems to have more destiny involved than he realizes.
mm,
Um, So I think it's pretty funny that and I think that's probably why that certain exec at Cartoon Network was like, oh, make Ash the lead, because he's like Ben 10. Although, I mean, I haven't watched the recent Ben 10 series. I heard
Hmm.
it's very like I know there's a lot of likable things about it. Like I've seen like art my friends have done on the show and stuff. It looks good.
Hmm.
But I worked on the first few series of Ben, and Ben's really bland, and he doesn't really have a lot. Like the other characters around him are more interesting, and like that's an easy thing to fall into with. I mean, I think with television media in general, not just animation, but I've worked on a lot of shows where the main character is really bland because they want kids that are watching it to self-insert. Like I understand that,
Yeah.
it's kind of funny. I know that those guys probably don't even remember this, but I think it was was it Omniverse Ben 10? When Matt Youngberg and stuff took it over. I remember we went to lunch one day, and I wasn't working on the show. Like I just do freelance for those guys sometimes. And they were talking about like, what do we do with Ben? And I remember like Scott Pilgrim just came out or something, and I was just like, dude, just make him like that guy. Just let him be a douche. Like I mean, he is one. Just lean into it. So I know that that's coming up in an interview with Matt before. Like he's mentioned that. But
Hmm.
I don't know if he remembers me saying that. But Ash is not Ash. Ash kind of started out kind of being a jerk, but Ash is just he's the naive little brother in the group, is what he is.
Yeah.
And he wants to be a knight. He wants to be a fighter, but he's an artist, and he likes he's kind of the goofball. He's just a happy-go-lucky guy. So
Yeah, and
yeah, I enjoy him.
he provides a pretty good contrast to Harpy whenever they're in scenes together.
Yeah, yeah. He's in all respects, he's basically her little brother, is how I've been treating him.
Hmm.
Um, I also know that there's a lot of like this, and this is all my personal like this like there's nothing wrong with this, but this is just my own personal pet peeve, and it was actually one of the reasons I was willing to sign with Nickelodeon. I kind of am not a fan of love triangles.
Hmm.
There's nothing wrong with them. I understand why they happen. I think it's just because I worked on a lot of superhero shows where those things happen, and after a while, a lot of it is it's pitting the girls against each other, and it's not fun in real life. I don't really want to see it in TV.
Hmm.
Um, and there was a few TV shows in the early 2010s that had a lot of that going on. And I remember when I was talking to the exec at Nick about, she's like, well, what do you not want to do with this? Like, she's like, I think the characters are in a good place. They're fleshed out. We don't really need to go in and change them. She's like, there's going to be notes, but I don't think there's going to be any notes on the mains.
Hmm.
And I told her, like, I don't want a love triangle. I don't want Opal and Harpy fighting over stuff, because honestly, like, no one's worth fighting over for friendship like that. And I think the characters are grown up enough to know better.
Hmm.
And she shook her head yes, like so hard, and she's like, like I said, like there was some other shows going on at the same time. She's like, yeah, because it didn't work for this show, and I'm like, yeah, it didn't work for this other show either.
Yeah.
So sorry, not to be like too catty, but it
Oh
it drives
no.
me up the wall.
No, but
Like I just
it's dynamics that you already have set in your head. You've had the time
yeah
with these characters to understand what they're capable of and what not capable of. And like for the listener or viewer, the character of Opal is the pink-haired one on the broom right now,
yeah
and Ash is the brown-haired one that you can see in some scenes. And
yeah
you know that they're dynamic together, how Harpy and Opal relate to each other. Here you can even see that they're cooperating, and not wanting that dynamic in your work. Like, yeah, obviously, of course, rather than trying to insert it into some place that it doesn't belong.
yeah. If it doesn't fit, like this isn't the story for it. Oh, there's a dog outside. Sorry.
Aw.
um. Yeah. Uh.
But that's wonderful.
But
I'm glad that you know that one, you had so much support in this process,
yeah.
that you have support now in your comic that you've built over time, that you've built this comic to fit into your life. And when it's been close to being translated into another medium, you've had support there too.
Yeah,
That's cool.
I've honestly been really lucky. Like, I mean, nothing is perfect. I know that there's probably things that, like probably could have been handled a little bit better. but overall, the people I worked with at Nick were really great, and a lot of them aren't even at Nick anymore. Like, execs move around as much as artists do, so
Yeah.
um, it's fine. It was one of those things. It was a bucket list thing. Like, I never thought I was going to see those characters animated.
Hmm.
I also even got the voice actors I wanted for them
Oh, that's
too, which is
cool.
really funny. Yeah, like I'll admit, like when I first started working on the comic early on, because I've worked on a lot of like Warner Brothers stuff off and on. I always could hear Jason Spizak when I was drawing Humphrey,
Hmm.
which is the Whitehead Prince.
Hmm.
Because he did Razor in the Green Lantern TV show, and he's done some other stuff. But I was like, yeah, it's a very trope. It's a very and it was funny too because I met Jason a few times before that. So when he came in to record Humphrey, he ran up and gave me like a big hug, and he's like, "Oh my god!" He's
Oh,
like, "What
that's
do you want?"
wonderful.
Yeah, and I'm like, "Well, I hate," and I told him I hate to typecast you, but I'm like, it's that whole like, it's not like I like you or anything. And he's like, "Oh, I know exactly what you want." And he like skipped into the booth. He's like, "No, that's my jam. I'm gonna do it."
Yeah.
So
Sometimes it
it
just
was really
fits.
cute. Yeah, it was really. He was very excited.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, it was really cute.
Well, we are close to hitting an hour now, and what I'd like to do is transition into talking about the current chapter and
Okay.
what's coming up next in Harpy Gee. You mentioned it a little bit before, a little bit of a tease, that a character who is related to Humphrey has emerged in the storyline, a scene that you've
Oh yeah.
wanted to do for a while. Can you say anything else about that?
I'm fine with saying it. Anyone who hasn't read the comic yet, sorry. Like, I'm gonna talk about some spoilers. It's been like 7 years. I mean, come on. I'm not gonna like avoid this forever. He has a twin sister named Helicia, and she kind of sets a dragon on the town in the first chapter. She's overworked, she's stressed, she thinks he skipped town and isn't there to support her or help her. And yeah, she basically lets a dragon loose at his birthday party, and it eats one of the guards. That wasn't her intention, but it does eat one of the guards named Dude Bro, who may or may not be based on somebody I know in real life. Like I said, I was going through stuff that year, and part of me was like, I gotta do something for myself.
Yeah.
Um. Anyway, yeah. Rest in peace, dude, bro.
Rest in
Uh,
peace.
you were with us for so short. Anyway, so she's always kind of been in the background. She hasn't really made an appearance since then. We just like she's shown up in flashbacks. She's really perfect. She's amazing at magic. She's basically the one who takes care of all the extra stuff in the kingdom. Their dad is just kind of home on the throne, doing his own king thing, but she's the one that's sent out to take care of like if a monster's out attacking someone's crops. She's the one who has to go out and kiss the babies. She's the one like she's always busy. She has her own assistant that follows her around everywhere and tells her what she has to do every minute of the day.
Hmm.
So the current chapter is a year time skip from where I left off last time because I needed a change of pace. I wanted there to feel like I also wanted to feel like the characters are now they're in a good place with each other. They've been with each other for an entire year. They're good friends. They know each other really well. They're there to support each other.
Hmm.
She shows up and she's gonna try to throw a wrench into everything. I mean, her brother, he has everything that she wishes she could have. He's got the friends. He's got the freedom. Like
Yeah.
he's just at a small town. He doesn't have to deal with any of this extra stuff.
Yeah. All the
So
burden.
yeah, so there's gonna be some weirdness. And I'm probably gonna update tomorrow evening. I hate to be late on an update, but I still need to do inks today. I need to do
It is
color, and I
an
still have
extraordinary time. I think people will forgive you.
yeah, yeah, and I actually still have some notes to do for an episode from last week on the show I'm working on. So if my boss is listening, I am very aware. I also I gotta draw for myself sometimes. Um, but I love you. So but yeah, I'm probably gonna just update probably tomorrow afternoon. Because it's a very simple update, but it's just to kind of give you an idea what's gonna happen on Monday is Harpy's gonna, she's gonna probably try to go in her own special way to, she doesn't like to see family not getting along. So, because her whole thing is she doesn't have she's an orphan. She doesn't have any biological family left, but she has been raised by the oldest prince of the Elf Kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
So she's been around some royals. Like she has the guy who raised her, he has some nieces that are some elven royalty that are brats, but Harpy and those two actually are in a pretty good place right now,
Mm-hmm.
if they like to admit it or not. So I think the fact that Harpy's like, well, like people come around, I know this, so I'm gonna see if I can help with the situation because she cares about her friends. So
Awesome. Awesome.
yeah,
That's wonderful. Well, I look
but
forward to seeing that. I look forward to reading it. If if someone is listening to, because this will be up on YouTube later, if someone's watching this video or someone's listening to this stream right now, but they've never read Harpy before, should they start with the latest chapter or should they start from the beginning?
I would say, I mean, the style. I know the style. I was expecting the art to change as I worked on it, and I wasn't gonna like guilt myself or feel bad about it because art is a learning process, and it's good to see that you've improved over time. I would say still start with chapter one. I know the art is really rough,
Doesn't look rough to
but
me.
I
It
think
looks
it's.
great.
Thank you. um, but yeah, it'll give you. I mean, chapter one starts really fast, and like I said earlier, because I was kind of redoing the plot, like in who the characters were. So early on, it's very very basic.
Mm-hmm.
I think first chapter actually reads really fast. Um, just to go back to what that exec at Nickelodeon told me, like she liked the first chapter. She really wanted to see it animated. We originally wanted the pilot to be part of the first chapter, but the problem is Humphrey shows up so late, and we tried working it out, but it was just a mutual agreement that like, yeah, we can't do this for the pilot. We can't do this for the short. It needs to be a one-off story.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I would say start with chapter one. The short doesn't really give anything away, and I structured that on purpose because we were probably going to have to go through focus testing. And so I made sure that the short doesn't have a lot of lore in it because you don't like, I wanted to focus on the characters only, and since I only had 3 minutes, that's why it's only Harpy and Pumpkin at the beginning, because the more dialogue you have, it adds time.
Mm-hmm.
Pumpkin doesn't talk, but
Mm-hmm.
everyone loves Pumpkin. I love Pumpkin. So yeah, I would say watch the short and read the first chapter to get started, and then if you want, you can skip ahead to chapter 5, but you might be a little lost,
Mm-hmm.
especially because of the time skip. Yeah.
Can you post a link to the short in the chat for people who are here?
Yeah, let me pull it up really fast. I'll just get the. You're gonna hear YouTube noises. My internet's a little slow because I have I'm kind of far from my router and stuff
Got
because of the
you.
way my apartment's set up.
Well,
My
while we're waiting
apartment.
for this, can you still hear me, Brienne?
Oh yes, I can still hear you. No problem.
Um, a question that came up in the last stream is Harpy Gee a play on the term RPG?
Yes, it is. And I laugh every time. I do not. It does not offend me if people don't figure it out. Every other month, like there'll be the comment section in Harpy Gee will get somebody will figure it out, and then there'll be like 10 people after like I didn't even catch that.
Yeah.
I have close friends who didn't even realize it for a couple of years, even when I was saying the word. But a thing that's really funny about sorry. A thing that's actually really funny internationally about that. So Harpy Gee is RPG, role playing game.
Mm-hmm.
Um, other languages use RPG too. I've actually had people in other countries message me who are like, English isn't my first language. I'm learning English. They understand the pun right away because of it.
Yeah.
So that's been pretty funny. Anyone whose English isn't their first language, they know it immediately because of
Gotcha.
that. Because it's an international thing. And that was something I didn't plan in advance. I will say, if you're starting a webcomic or working on any sort of creative written project or show or movie, title is kind of important. Like, do a Google search. Like, just, I mean, you don't have to. It doesn't have to be like super well thought out, but like, you know, give yourself an easy way. Give people an easy way to find your comic once they find it. You
Yeah.
know, because that's the thing with animation that people run into a lot is they'll title a show and they don't have the rights to that word or something, or you know or it's too similar to something else that's out there.
Yeah.
So I felt kind of like, oh, my comic has a really dumb title, and it's kind of like a stretch too why it's called Harpy Gee, because uh like Harpy's real name is Gigi Geranium,
Mm-hmm.
and her nickname is Harpy because she saved her kingdom from basically an apocalyptic beast that has almost wiped out the elves before.
Mm-hmm.
She basically screamed at it, and that scared the beast away. So that's why her nickname's Harpy. Um, she's just a little rough around the edges a little bit. Yeah, so that's why it's called Harpy Gee, but it's also a pun on RPG. So
That's awesome. Yeah, it blew people away, like Ren is talking about in the chat. It blew people away last stream. It's great.
yeah, and I don't focus on it too much in the comic, but Harpy is one of those people that she likes to try a lot of new things. She likes to play a lot of roles, and one of the things that's happening in this chapter is um she's taking a lot of odd jobs around town. She's not just working at the item shop. She's working at the tailor's shop. She's working at she's helping out at the castle. She's doing a lot of odds and ends in different places. So yeah, because that was something that was in my original animation pitch, was that when she's in town, she'll do anything. She wants to try everything.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's
yeah,
awesome. And like you talking about an item shop, the things, the fantasy aspects of this, I'd love to talk to you about it some other time.
yeah.
That
Thanks.
would be so fun because just the thought of the fantasy elements of this and talking about that would be so great. But unfortunately, we are running out of time, and I do not want to take all of Brienne's day up. Do you have any final thoughts or anything that you'd like to tell the audience?
Um, I guess with everything that's been going on, and like with how crazy work is and everything, like it's okay if you want to do a webcomic and it's just your hobby. It doesn't have to be anything more than that.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to take breaks. It's okay to play Animal Crossing if you have Animal Crossing. It's okay to take 6 months off from your comic and play Breath of the Wild, because sometimes you got to do that. And when Breath of the Wild 2 comes out, Harpy's going to go on hiatus. Got to do some research.
Yep, absolutely.
Research.
Absolutely. That is a wonderful note to end on. So for everyone in the chat, I'm going to repost the !Harpy command. You can read Harpy Gee at harpygee.com. And thank you to everybody. This is the end of the whole event, where this has been another BEEHOME kind of stream. Thank you to Ren for helping me with the marketing and talking and Twitter and everything. Thank you to Atla for running that recommendation panel. Thank you to Issa for running the SpecFic panel. This has been awesome. Thank you, Brienne, for joining me for this interview. Thank you to Adam and Colin for the interview that I did yesterday. we would like to do another stream. Let us know what you think on Twitter, on everywhere else that we are, Instagram. You can follow us on Twitter, Hiveworks, at HIVEWORKS, or you can read Harpy Gee as well as many other great comics at hiveworkscomics.com. I will see you all some other time. Thank you for joining us. And thank you for joining us again, Brienne.
Thank you.
Have have a good day, everyone. We're going to go now. Goodbye.
Are we done? Can you still hear me?